Hey, Mike White. Yep.
Hey, all right, good deal. Hey, welcome. See Ange on there, Ernest, Vance. Welcome, Vance. I've looked you up a bunch. Michael Stewart, looking forward to Mountaintop, Pennsylvania. That's great. So I will be sharing here. 1 second. As soon as can you make me the host there, Rudy? I'm in Milwaukee as well for you guys. I'm excited to share this. Amanda, welcome. All right, here we go. So today's presentation, I'm going to start by telling a story that should be super familiar to everybody here. And we titled this Beyond Employee of the Month. And the reason we're going beyond Employee of the Month is that's programs like that are table stakes. So either it's Employee of the Month or it's MVPs. There's that structure of the very entry level infrastructure of recognition that almost all of us have, right? We have employee luncheons. We have maybe an executive comes by. We have all those things. And what we want to do is say, hey, what's next? How do we change and move the needle? And we're going to do that through a story about Sarah. So Sarah is an 8X talent. And what the big consulting firms will tell you is when you have a superior talent, they're producing 8 times more than the average employee. So those are the ones we really need to hold on to. Those are the folks that we really are making the big difference in our organization. And so I want to paint a picture of you sitting down with Sarah and you're getting ready to recognize her and you're all excited and you say, hey, Sarah, your attention to detail, your willingness to step up, I just want to say thank you. Give her a card maybe. And you go through examples of how she's been great throughout the last 6 months. And you see her get excited. And then by the end of the conversation, she says, thank you. And walks out of your office. And you're sitting there and you're like, no, they should be excited. Sarah should be excited. I told her she's great. I just recognized her. Why is she not excited? And when that happens, and it's happened many times, is that you hit the mark, you miss the mark, and you don't know why. And then on top of that, about the same time, you're getting an employee survey that says, we need to get better recognition. And you're like, wait a second, I'm telling people that I'm telling them they're good at this. What? I don't get it. And it should be easy. It doesn't feel easy. Don't know why it doesn't feel easy when that happens. So we're gonna talk through simple tricks. And I have a bunch of books that talk in broad, wide terms about recognition. I'm going to give you just really simple tips that you can walk away from today. And I did this survey on LinkedIn. I thought I'd share it. Is 54% of people don't like Employee of the Month. And I can assure you it's not because Employee of the Month, not because we're disciplined and we run it the right way every time. I'll shout out to Ernest. Ernest is one of the few facilities that I see Employee of the Month really impactful. If you do it well, and you have discipline, it can work. But I want to go beyond that. I want you to go beyond that broad system and look at on the individual basis. And the part that always has stuck out with me as the Employee of the Month is, say you have 100 people, only one person gets it. So if you're like me, and several of you on this call are like me, is when you can be happy for the person that gets it, but you wanted it, right? And the reality is you can't have it every month. And our brains don't think like that. And your employees' brains don't think like that. So why focus on recognition and why even talk about it? I'll tell you right now, it's almost free. It's almost free to do this. And there's, whether it's Harvard, Gallup, the Society of HR, SHRM, Society of HR Management, or Globoforce, or Deloitte, they're all going to tell you recognition makes a difference to your bottom line and gets you more productive. And I'm going to tell you, it has to be good recognition that does that. I have that now. There's a lot of numbers on here, but I want you to say that, I want to just point out, I'm not focused on the derailers. I'm not focused on the passengers. Recognition is about focusing on the good employees. And several of us in here in HR, frontline leaders, that we get so focused on that guy paddling the wrong way that we forget about those star performers, those 42.5% that are paddling the right way. And if you're not giving them that pat on the back, then guess what? They fall back into that key contributor. They move back in the boat. So I've done this several times. I've launched several HR led recognition programs. They're typically most successful if I partner with an ops leader. But the things that come out of people's mouths on when you try to attack this problem or this opportunity, it shouldn't even be a problem, it's just an opportunity, is people are never happy. You can't do anything about it. And then you run into, we're not capable of being consistent. Some people are going to tell you that, oh, well, you got to do it for one. We need to be equal. No, you don't. You don't have to be equal. If all employees work like robots and they were all equal, then you could be equal, but everyone's different. So we can look at an individual basis. There's all these things that can get in the way. And at the end of the presentation, I'll give you an opportunity. I've heard them so many times. It's like I got the script for each one of these, so I'll hand that out to y'all. If you want to get past those people that are the energy vampires and the naysayers, we can do that. I'll tell you, when I started Secchi, this was a big motivator for me. I'm telling you a little story about me. We're not talking about Sarah right now, but I had a factory of 340 plus people. I walk in on my very first day. So imagine you're a brand new employee. You run into somebody on the floor, and I say, "Hey, how's it going?" First thing he says to me is, he starts grumbling, not having a good day. And I say, "Well, what's wrong?" And he says, I'm going to quote it because it's pretty close. "I'm never coming to a company sponsored event again. You wouldn't believe these people. They got everyone a steak dinner and they didn't have the decency of getting a side salad." And that, I hope, I know I can't get laughs. If somebody can, on the group, do a thumbs up to say they've experienced something like that, where you try to do something great and there is someone there to make sure to tell you it's not great. You got a steak dinner when we don't even provide anything. And that is going to stick with me the rest of my career. And then at that same facility, I bought sandwiches from the best sandwich shop. They were expensive. And I realized, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I spent $5,000 to the company money. And what that did is got 80% of people happy for 30 minutes. After that 30 minutes is up, they forget that we ever bought them sandwiches. And then 20% were so mad that we didn't have barbecue chips, and we got Frito-Lay's originals. And I prefer barbecue chips too, but those 20% didn't even care. So that means, rough numbers, if you're at 300, you're at 60 people that are more mad coming in with a free lunch than leaving. And that got me thinking, what if I could figure out who my top 10, 20, 30 people are at this facility? I could buy them and their spouse a catered buffet with the president of their company. And if I could figure out who those top people were, I could make a real difference with the top performers. I shouldn't lump everyone together. This doesn't make sense to lump them together. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I think a lot of people on the call know me, but for those of you who don't know me, I've been in human resources for 15 years. I worked for Johns Manville, Caterpillar, Fairlife Milk, and Masterlock, part of Fortune Innovations. And I've done plant startups, plant shutdowns, the union stuff, the non-union stuff. This doesn't matter if it's union or non-union, same thing. And I've had thousands of interactions with employees on recognitions, and I failed, as I showed you before. I failed a whole bunch of times, and I've learned from those, and I've gotten better and better. And still today, if you took me to Mountaintop, PA with Michael, it'd probably take a few times before we hit it right. I want you to think about recognition as it's not something you can just pick up and move. I learned that real quick. Every place is unique, and you have to try. It's about perseverance more than anything. So I'm going to show you a framework that you can.
Hey, Mike and Trudy, just want to interrupt you. We lost your screen share there. If you can just share your screen again. Thanks.
Yep. So I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework to get this confusing process and make it a little less confusing. And also, when you start working on these projects, one of the first thing that happens is somebody goes, "We should do employee of the month. We should do a lunch. We should do a birthday parties." Maybe you should. Maybe you should. But I'm gonna hit the pause button and say, before we jump into action, let's go through a few little things from a framework standpoint. The reason it is hard is because people are hard, and there's not an algorithm for it. And as much, I've worked with a lot of engineers, and some engineers have figured out how to engineer it, but it's still people, and you got different personalities and how they interact differently and all that stuff. We know it's the reason you're on this call is because it's not easy. So as we talk through this, I'm going to hit on 4 points. And those 4 points are, I want you to be intentional. I want you to think about intentionality. I want you to think about context. I want you to think about I want you to think about the reward at the end of the game. So at the end of the day, if you don't tie this to rewards, you are not recognizing correctly, and it won't mean anything. And rewards doesn't have to be money. And I'll talk a little bit about that. The last piece is I'm going to quote Jocko Willink. And if you don't like Jocko Willink, Aristotle said the same thing. But discipline equals freedom. And so if you do not put a discipline into your recognition, you cannot be free from this problem. And it will be a problem if you don't have discipline. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So with the intentional, this is the easy one. You all should, this is the notes. This is the thing to write down when you go, hey, what did I learn? I went to that meeting. What did I learn? Be intentional. The more time and effort you're thinking about it, the more authentic you come off. So if I sit down with a blank sheet of paper and I go, I am going to recognize Chris Yoder today. If I sit there and think for an hour before I write, my recognition is going to be better. It's going to be more authentic. If I just write thank you on the card and run, it's going to mean less. It's almost a perfect linear line of thought and effort to recognition, and the way it's received is authentic. So your timing matters, your alignment to your goals and your peers matter. This is just being intentional. This is super simple. It's not magic. I will call out, we don't want good jobs. You don't want to recognize somebody for being positive after they come back from bereavement. And also the words, you're irreplaceable. That's flattery. That's a lie. We're all replaceable. So be aware of that, those contexts, the way that the words you're using when you're recognizing someone matters. Because although you're writing it, and if you're honest with yourself, you're probably not remembering what you wrote, but I assure you those folks that you're recognizing will remember, especially if it's something that it only comes along on a rare occasion. The second step, context. This is the hardest part to me. This is the hardest part because the most used word in the English language is I. It's not about what you want, it's about what they want. So I found, and Chris on the call, but I found over the years that I had this HR manager that was on me. You got to read this book. You got to read this book. You got to read this book. And I read this 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. And it's such a impactful way to think about recognizing and showing appreciation. There's 5 languages of appreciation: words of affirmation, gifts, quality time, acts of service, and appropriate physical touch. So it's easy to do, and what most of us do is we recognize and show appreciation in the way that we like to be recognized and show appreciation. So what that I'll talk about each one of these real briefly. You'll have to read the book or Google the synopsis. But words of affirmation means saying things, writing things down. Do you feel appreciated when those are getting written down and handed to you? That matters. The quality time is, are we going to a work lunch? Am I spending time on your presentation, helping you practice your presentation? Am I that quality time where we spend it together working on, just spend it together. We don't even have to be working on something. This great example is windshield time. If you ever travel with coworkers and they enjoy and feel appreciated when you're in the car together and talking with them. Gifts. This can be money. This can be a shout out to Fairlife. They sent me my boss there sent me a onesie when I had my daughter, and I still remember. I was like, that means a lot, because it was hard to be away from work for me. I felt guilty. And that onesie was a great way to welcome me into the team. That gift mattered. Acts of service. This is working together, pitching in. You might see this. You might see an opportunity if you're in your workplace. Maybe you're moving offices. You see somebody moving offices. You help them move. The person that comes in to clean, you clean. You do a preliminary clean of them to help them out. Those acts of service are another language. And then appropriate physical touch. There's people out there that just want a handshake and a look in the eye, and it means a lot. This, especially if you're an executive on this call, if you take the time to go out to a production floor, or you take the time to go to where the entry-level employee is and shake their hand and say thank you, that's appropriate physical touch. So back to my point of what you like, or it's not about you, it's about them. So understanding what their language is in the context is so important when you're doing these individual recognitions and you're trying to get that recognition culture going. How do you find out what people are? Is you see how they recognize their team. You see when they start shining. You see when they puff their chest out after some. Do they enjoy getting in front of the group and getting the award? Well, they probably are words of affirmation. Afterwards you shake their hand and you say thank you, and they tell you a story for 20 minutes. They probably like that handshake. So be aware of that and understanding the context. I'll throw it in the endorsement for the 5 languages of appreciation. Step 3, recognition will not be great without a reward. And it doesn't have to be about money. That's a picture of me and several of you, the HR folks that are on the phone, trying to mediate an end of the year review. And this is so important to me. If you are recognizing someone and at the end of the year, you're sitting down and your performance review does not have any of that recognition, you are missing the boat. You're going to miss it. And so just like you document performance, just like you document goals or KPIs, people's bad behavior, those 5%ers that are rolling the wrong way, you have to tie this in to the end of the year. It's just like a must. And it doesn't mean they get promoted. And I highlight here the parameters and the boundaries. You got to put context clues. You got to make sure you set the boundary with the employee. Say, I know I've recognized you a lot. Promotions have luck and timing involved with them. I'm going to help you and you're going to get better as I coach you along. But you have to understand I'm not the only person making these decisions, but we're going to do our best to set you up for success. And if I say under promise on this one with employees, and over deliver. If you might get lucky, you might get some timing, but those big moments, you need to systematically document. If you're not systematically documenting the big moments, you're missing the boat with your employees. And I got a personal example of a year that I worked as hard as I've ever worked in my career. I won awards. I got extra cash early in the year, which I joke, don't do good things at one of the big corporate places I work. Don't do good things in the first quarter because they won't be remembered in the fourth. And this is because of this experience. But yeah, that first quarter, I got cash, led a whole bunch of teams, got results. And at the end of the year, I kept getting these outside influences of recognition. At the end of the year, my boss sat me down and said, "Hey, your meets expectations. You're middle of the road." And my experience with him did not match my experience that I got throughout the year. Now, if it was systematically documented and we had those conversations to prep me as an employee, that end of the year review could have been a better situation. So I'm giving you the watch out of setting expectations, under promising, over deliver with your employees, but also you need to be aware of what you're what you're recognizing with, and bring those up at the end of the year, because it will not make sense to employees. And it is wildly confusing if you recognize them and there's no reward. So as we think about our example with Sarah, and you missed the mark, I think there's a question there is, okay, with Sarah, I missed the mark. What about my timing? What did I not include? What should I have included when I brought her into my office to recognize her? This one is harder than I think that we give it a credit for, but it's important. And then the last step is process consistency. And this is as soon as you bring this up in hey, let's fix recognition. Somebody says, okay, every Friday we recognize someone. And then the naysayer in the room says, oh, it's not authentic if you schedule it. I will call BS all day long. You must have a process. I'm giving you 2 musts. These are absolutes. If you wait until you're free to do recognition, your recognition will be haphazard. It will be pathetic. It'll be rushed. You need to schedule it. And you can do it whether you read the book Atomic Habits, you can time splice it. You can put phone reminder in your phone, calendar, your checklist. Of course, you don't share that with your employee. And you want to not just be a perfect pattern of recognition, but if you're not doing that, you're going to miss it. And we all think we recognize all the time. I don't know anybody that says that they do underperforming on recognition. The next step with this process consistency is this is where you learn, you make improvements. If you have a process, you write it down, you make improvements on that process. Progress over perfection. You're going to make some people mad when you're trying recognition, but that's okay. And then document it, document. I mentioned on the last one, I should have mentioned on each one of these steps, documenting your recognition is as important as doing it, because you're going to tie that back to the end of the year reviews. And if you quit the process, you quit getting the outcome. I've done thousands of employee surveys. I've read thousands of them, probably hundreds of thousands of them comments, thousands of employee surveys, read the comments. I've never heard we recognize too much. I have also never heard your recognition is inauthentic. Now, on an individual basis, I've heard that complaint, but if you're not setting up a process, you're going to fail. It's simple. I brought a little screenshot in here just to show you the documentation that Secchi can give you. And of course, this is about recognition, but I also want to just demonstrate how I would expect that to be for if you're wanting to change the culture, if you're wanting to improve your recognition, you should be able to look at a calendar, and you can do it on a paper calendar. You can do it on a spreadsheet. it's a little bit harder. And if people change shifts and all that other stuff, if you want to make it easy, you can buy Secchi. But right there, I can immediately know where the recognition is and what they did. And so that consistent process of seeing those dates, that's what moves the needle. You're not going to move it if you're not being consistent. So lastly, I'll say the impact. So what's the impact? I already gave you the business case, right? Like all those studies, huge percentage increases, yet we put it at the bottom of our list of things to do, is that recognition. And I worked with a guy that told me, oh, he doesn't like, he really hard-nosed, old school manufacturing guy. I don't need recognition in front of people. And I want my team to get recognition. He says the right stuff, and he's a great leader because he does care about his team more than himself. He's a servant leader. But one day I wrote him a thank you card for something he did. And when I gave it to him, we talked, he gave it to him, said thank you, and he put it in his desk. And I saw on his desk, I'm like, what's that? And he goes, oh, I keep all my thank yous. He had I'd worked with him. I've been in the car a bunch. He never mentioned this because I think he thinks it's too prideful. But those thank yous, he kept every single one of them throughout his career. He's like, yeah, I got a big box of them back home. And so that impact makes a big difference. That if you get the right, he's words of affirmation, if you get the right language of appreciation, you're making a difference in somebody's life. You're changing their career trajectory. That folder right there, that's a picture of mine. I keep them. And I brought them out for this as I was prepping for this meeting. And I thought about how many of these just changed working relationships. It changed friendships for me. And it's changed how I think about business and what I spent time on. It matters. You're making a big impact. The second one there is those are my Athens cards. So when I talk about the process it was a Tuesday, February 13th, 2013. I'll throw that, might be off by a day. President Obama had a State of the Union address, of which he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, manufacturing jobs are coming back to the United States. Caterpillar has brought jobs back from Japan. And regardless of your political, who cares if you think he's good or bad? That doesn't really matter. It's pretty awesome to get recognized by the President of the United States during a State of the Union address on something you're specifically working on. We came in that next day, everybody's pumped up. Did you hear that? Did you see that? Shortly thereafter, we're doing an all-employee meeting, and we can't think of a way to recognize our frontline employees. Like, this is like, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks later. I'd like to say that I came up with the idea. I think it was our plant manager. It might be one of our ops managers. If they're on this call, they're going to message me afterwards and send me a text message. Somebody came up with the idea every Wednesday morning during our staff meeting. We had a daily huddle, and then we had a staff meeting. Plant manager said, hey, don't come to the meeting without a card filled out. So we filled out these cards, and these ones are mine. I kept them. They're in that folder. And we would write thank you cards, and all of us would sign the inside to pass it along. And that was the system and the process to make sure. And we'd bring one of the ladies specifically would bring in hundreds of cards. We'd sign them. Sometimes we spent the whole meeting signing them, but we never had that problem again. The only thing that I would change from that process is if I could have used that for the end of the year performance reviews. I was too new in my career to know how to document all those. If I could have documented those to see who the top performers are, it would have been excellent. But I know personally from some of the thank yous I have in that folder, I know personally it made a big difference on people's lives. So I will say, if you email me at mwhite@secchi, I'll send you over, and anybody on this call will get a copy of the quick guide. But a quick guide, and then I have responses for those barriers. My favorite being, we already recognize you get a paycheck, those type of things. So I have the quick guide, and I'll have the overcoming barriers with a few suggestions I can send out to you all by the end of the week. Going back to Sarah. So we remember Sarah, right? We're going to do it right this time. So Sarah walks in, you missed the mark, you said all the right things, but you missed the mark. You're going to be more intentional. You're going to think about timing. One of the timing things I like to do is if you recognize somebody, it's not universal, but it's almost universal to do it in the morning when they're not exhausted. So we're going to be intentional with Sarah. We're going to do the right timing. We're going to have the right context. Sarah is a quality time person. So by recognizing her, I'm going to take her to lunch and I'm going to have all my details, but it's that time that she's a quality time. That's how she feels appreciated. So I'm going to speak her language, not mine. In my language, I'm going to lunch and I'm going, oh, I got so much to do. I got so much to do. I need to get back. I need to get back to work. That's not my language. But it doesn't matter what mine is. I'm not being selfish. I'm thinking about Sarah. The recognition will be tied to rewards. So I'm going to document it. Luckily, I have Secchi, so I'm going to document it so that at the end of the year, my recognition lunch for her in February is remembered in her review in December or November. And ultimately, even if you think about this, even if you're not getting the immediate promotion or pay raise, if you're documenting it, you're helping your employee out more than you probably think you are, because that's going to be in writing that you're able to get to the next manager. You're able to get to, if you leave, the next manager has it. If you share it with your supervisor, it's all easy. It's not just a one-off thing. It's in a systematic process. And then the great thing is, I mentioned, you have the tools. So you have Secchi to drive your discipline and process. So you're going to write down the process. If you want to change recognition and you have a problem with recognition and you go, hey team, what's our process for recognition? And you don't get one answer, you're missing, swing and a miss. Make that improvement. Try something different. So I'll quit right there and I'll open it up for questions. Any comments, you can do it. If you don't want to speak up, you can do it in the chat as well. Please, somebody that's just all out friend, throw something on here. Throw me a bone. I'm sitting here all awkward.
I'll comment on the 5 languages book. This is Chris Yoder.
This is the guy who made me read it.
But just really good book. Maybe several of you are familiar with the relationship book, 5 Love Languages, same authors, good concept. It does. In the past, I've purchased this book for my team members, and it does have an online quiz that can tell you your language of appreciation, your primary and secondary one. So if you go online, you can find the quiz, but it costs just as much as the book. So might as well get the book out of it. But interesting concept. I definitely have experienced that scenario that Mike talks about, where you have a big event and it only hits the mark for half of those people. So this really attacks that concept and says, here, let's recognize people in the way they want to recognize, so you get some bang for the buck out of it.
Yeah. I think too is I had read I think I read the Love Languages, and I then got the workplace appreciation. It just gives you great context and examples. It's pretty dang powerful. See if I got I got somebody that good to see. I didn't see Dan and Lauren sneak in, so thanks for coming.
I was late.
No, you're good. You're good. Dan and I work together. I will say that when it comes to recognition and lessons learned in communication, I'm going to say be intentional. So one of the mistakes that I made that I'd love to share with you all is on the intentional spot is choosing your words wisely. We actually did I did a wage study, which should have been a huge positive thing. And I probably rushed it. I used the wrong language, and then I had to claw my way back. And I don't know that I ever did, with the trust of employees. And it wasn't offensive. It wasn't overtly inappropriate or anything like that. But that intentional part, if I went back to that wage review and did it the right way, I would have been way more selective on my words. And yeah, I just seeing Dan's name just rejuvenates that mistake that I made in recognition.
Hey, Mike, you might have covered this earlier. I apologize, I was late. But one thing I was concerned about is I'm thinking about, what I can do from this perspective. And have you ever had any concerns that, okay, I recognize somebody individually and then they're going to share it with other coworkers. And then those people are going to say, well, why didn't I get recognized? Has that ever been a problem?
Yeah, this is a good one, Dan. So when I moved to Georgia from Central Illinois, I didn't realize how much unionization was in my culture. And I'm not from a union, strong union family. My mom was in the union, but it wasn't like we went to union events or anything like that. But just growing up in Illinois and being around this idea that everyone should be treated the same, I got confused, or I was able to break this like framework up of consistent versus the equal. There's a difference. There's a difference between just being consistent and treating everyone the same. And so it was a problem when I moved to Georgia, although it was a union plant. I moved to Georgia and I thought I had to treat everyone the same. And I realized if I start using the word, even just the slight change of being consistent. So when you recognize those people, I'm guessing, Dan, and knowing you, you are consistent about your recognition. Some people are going to get different things than others. I think at the end of the day, if you have a consistent methodology to do it, so it may be a random recognition and maybe a random act of kindness kind of thing, but you're consistent in that every so often you do something big. I will say that I have been recognized in a way in my past where I got the explicit instructions: do not tell anyone about this. This is super special. It's very rare. We don't publicize this. You're getting recognized in this way. So I think that matters. But I think that's an option. But I also think the better thing is when you think about going off to do that one person, when they talk to everybody, that's okay. And the idea of Dan, you're going to be consistent. So that next one, employees go, well, I didn't get that. And you say, all right, let's talk about it. And let's talk about that specific thing they did. Well, I did the same thing, but I didn't get the recognition. You're like, well, there's some timing, I have to see it. It's, maybe it'll be you next time. And I think that conversation, if you're having it, is okay. I also think it's okay if you're doing something really freaking big. If you're giving somebody, a trip or something, it's okay to say, I prefer you not to share, or I don't want you to share.
Yeah, I think my concern was, does it create some discontent on the other person's part? If somebody goes, hey, I got this maybe thank you note or a small award or something, and then they go, well, I didn't get that, and then they're going to be a little discontented, as opposed to doing something positive. You kind of created a problem.
Yeah, I actually was talking to investors about this, and an investor said, well, you guys Secchi makes it too easy to recognize people. It's going to water down recognition. And I go back to one is being intentional. Step one is the being intentional, right? If you spend time thinking about your authentic recognition, you're going to be okay. I would say I think I've read probably hundreds of thousands of comments on surveys of employee surveys. And I do not recall one single survey I don't recall one single survey of anyone saying somebody else got recognized and I didn't, it wasn't fair. Now they're going to feel discontent, maybe a little bit, but I don't think it's a theme. I think it's more scary. Like it's this monster that we don't know what to do with it. It's more scary than it's actually it's scarier than the actual impact, because you're gonna be consistent at it. So,
and hey, Mike, I think I'll tie in maybe a comment and then looping back in a question that was asked in the chat. I think it's a little bit scary to use that word that you just used, to think of the impact of not giving that recognition. So scarier to not give it and be worried about the impact on somebody else's feelings that's not getting the recognition than to give it and think about the impact that that person would not have had by getting that recognition. But to tie it up to a question that was asked in the chat, Ari asked the question, what's the best way to figure out your employees' appreciation language? Or maybe I'll restate this question. What's the best way to ask how an employee likes to be recognized?
the best way to ask is you can ask, this is going to sound counterintuitive, but I don't go at it and say, how do you like to be recognized? You can say that. I shouldn't say you can't. Some people will tell you. I think you have to do a little bit of their actions will speak more than their words most of the time. And one of the best ways to do it, Lauren, is ask them, hey, what's your favorite way to recognize people? Do you like surprising them? Do you like getting that cool gift? Do you like spending time with them? Like, ask them how they like to recognize people. That's like my little cheat of figuring out the best way to connect with folks. And then watching too. If I could go back in time, I would write down in my cell phone when I put in a contact, I typically write kids' names, their ages, and anything that's a big life event that maybe happened to that person. So if I ever share I try whenever I share contacts, I make sure that's deleted, or I try to make sure that's deleted. But if you could write down, I wish I could go back through my contact list and write down their love language or language of appreciation, and or the one that I think it's there. The other thing I'll say is I talked about progress versus perfection. No, I'm not kidding you. You just have to, this is a tension to be managed, not a problem to be solved. This will never be solved. No one will ever say, I'm great at recognition, because it is never enough. We cannot be appreciative of enough. And so if you came into the meeting and said, Mike's going to fix appreciation and the problem solved at the end, it's not. Even the methodology that I just showed you, I just showed the framework, and ultimately going through this framework over and over and over again and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking is what changes that facility, which is what changes your interaction with the Sarahs, and it's what changes the culture for more recognition. And I can't stress enough process, but yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And what I would add to that is, I think you said it without saying it, is the culture of recognition, creating that culture and finding a way to sustain that over time. And there are some tools for that. I've heard there's some tools for sustaining culture of recognition.
Yeah, I think Secchi it's an easy one. It's the easy button. If you want to make it hard, you don't have to use Secchi, but you do need to document it. All right. Any more questions, thoughts?
One other question, Mike, that came up in the chat is the question, will we be hosting more of these webinars?
Yes. Answer is yes. I also going to tie them closely. I see some of our customers on here is tying them closely to like customer questions and insights. And this was inspired by one of our customers had some of the things on the Be Intentional that I thought, oh man, yeah, if you've never been through a training on recognition, you know, those great job comments or you're irreplaceable comments, we need to get out in front of our customers and encourage better communication. And you don't have line of sight to that communication if you don't have Secchi. But now that we have line of sight to Secchi or line of sight to their connections, we'll find more opportunities within our customer base and feed it from there. Or if you asked me, hey, Mike, what are your thoughts on coaching? What are your thoughts on performance management? I got plenty of opinions. All right. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. I especially appreciate the frontline leaders that joined today and look forward to connecting with you.
Thanks, everybody.